On the morning of May 19th, 1780, the folks of Boston, Massachusetts were going about their day. Everything seemed typical at first, but suddenly things began to change in the sky above. The sun slowly started to fade away, and the environment below got darker and darker and darker. One individual by the name of Jeremy Belknap described the event like this. He stated that the day began cloudy, but nothing atypical. But then around 10 or 11 o'clock, the clouds became yellow. In fact, the whole sky became yellow, which gave the landscape below a yellow tint. The yellow turned from an orange to a red to a brown until everything finally just became black. It had gotten so dark that it was essentially night. Candles were needed to do basic work. It was literally night during the day. And this darkness wasn't like a thunderstorm rolled in. It was a significant event, and it scared the living daylights literally out of... Gosh, my puns need to stop. People thought for sure it was Judgment Day. Several people prayed all day once the darkness had started, and they wouldn't stop. And this darkness wasn't just over Boston, Massachusetts. It was over all of New England and even parts of Canada. In fact, up in Quebec, Canada, the same yellowy sky was seen, followed by darkness. There were even individuals in New Jersey who described seeing a strange yellow substance in the water. The darkness would last for the rest of the day into the night, and it wouldn't be until the next morning that the sun finally came out and everything seemed back to normal. This strange blackout event is now known as New England's Dark Day, and it's intrigued scientists, historians, and researchers for centuries. This strange dark days phenomenon didn't just occur once in New England in 1780, it's actually occurred several times throughout history. These strange dark events have heavily impacted the psyche of the local residents who witnessed them, some of them fearing for their lives. So what's up with these dark days? Like, what is going on? Why is it suddenly getting dark at noon? Well, that's what we're discussing in today's video. We'll be discussing several different dark day events. We'll be talking about their causes, we'll be talking about the different theories surrounding them, and we'll even discuss why some of them still can't be explained even to this day. Let's get into it. So let's go back to New England's Dark Day of 1780. We know for a fact that this happened because there are eyewitnesses in the hundreds all over New England. Some areas were worse than others. Some areas it only got a little dark, but some areas it was literally dark as night. In the days following the darkness, people had all sorts of strange ideas on what occurred. Many of the experts of the day attributed the darkness to a volcanic eruption. There were also others who thought, hey, maybe there was a comet that for some reason caused this darkness. Of course, there were people who thought it was a form of judgment. They thought that God was angry. They thought that he was sending down his wrath, a warning perhaps. And they had good reason to believe this. There's actually a reference to dark days in the Bible. In Exodus chapter 10, verse 21 through 22, it states, "Then the Lord said to Moses, stretch out your hand toward heaven, that there may be darkness over the land of Egypt, darkness which may even be felt. So Moses stretched out his hand toward heaven, and there was thick darkness in all the land of Egypt for 3 days. One such believer in the biblical plague of darkness theory was First Lady John Adams' wife, Abigail Adams, who stated this: "About 8 o'clock in the evening, almost instantaneously, the heavens were covered with Egyptian darkness. Objects the nearest to you could not be discerned, though the moon was at her full. It continued till 12 at night, and then disappeared without either wind or rain. I have given you only my own observations. I hope some of our philosophical geniuses will endeavor to investigate so unusual an appearance. It was the most solemn appearance my eyes ever beheld, but the philosophical eye can look through and trust the ruler of the sky." That last part was kind of weird. So what happened over the skies of New England in 1780? Well, to figure out what happened, we're going to actually look at other historic dark days. In fact, we can go all the way back to ancient times. For example, during the crucifixion of Jesus Christ, according to the Gospels, the sun went black and a darkness covered the land. Throughout the Middle Ages, there were a few recorded events that described the stars coming out during the day. There's also been several recorded dark days over very specific areas. In fact, on March 19th, 1886, apparently a darkness came over the town of Oshkosh, Wisconsin. According to the La Crosse Daily Republican, a darkness had suddenly settled upon the city of Oshkosh, Wisconsin at 3 p.m. In only 5 minutes, the darkness was equivalent to that of midnight. Eyewitnesses claimed that this was a black mist, a dark black mist that slowly approached the city from the west, almost like a thunderstorm, but as it passed over over the city, it got so dark that it was essentially midnight. And then within 10 minutes, this black mist continued on into other parts of Wisconsin, although all the reports seem to only come from Oshkosh. The dark moment over Oshkosh, Wisconsin is a pretty intriguing event. And when I said that it only lasted 10 minutes, I'm sure many of you had the same thought process as me and said, wait a second, I know exactly what caused that blackout event. It was a solar eclipse. In fact, solar eclipses could explain by far the majority of dark days recorded throughout history. A solar eclipse is, as I'm sure many of you are aware, when the moon goes in between the sun and the earth, it casts its shadow on the surface of the earth. And if you're within that shadow, the day becomes night. It becomes dark all around. The shadow then follows a very specific path on the earth's surface. Witnessing a solar eclipse is seriously one of the craziest events that I've ever seen. The sky goes dark and literally stars and planets can come out, and the entire horizon kind of looks like a sunset. It's got that orange glow all around. There's a good reason why many people throughout history who witnessed solar eclipses literally thought the world was ending. So, problem solved. It was a solar eclipse over Oshkosh, Wisconsin in 1886. Oh wait, one problem. The thing about solar eclipses is we know exactly when they occurred and exactly when they will occur in the future. Because, we got the orbits figured out, we got the math figured out, somehow people know when this stuff is going to... They're highly predictable. And there definitely wasn't one over Oshkosh, Wisconsin on that date. It literally did not happen. I think the nearest one during that year was over the ocean somewhere. One thing that is kind of interesting to think about, though, is a solar eclipse during a cloudy day. You don't want a cloudy day during a solar eclipse because that ruins the whole show. But if you lived throughout historic times, back before we knew about all this stuff, and it was a cloudy day, and all of a sudden it just got pitch black outside, you would be like, what on earth is going on? And for good reason. I mean, you wouldn't be able to see the sun, so it just got dark for 5 minutes. And it's very likely that many historic dark days were cloudy solar eclipses where they couldn't confirm it was a solar eclipse. The much more likely situation with Oshkosh, Wisconsin, is that it was probably a very unique storm system that moved through. All the people who witnessed this described that black mist. A mist is just a cloud. So a black cloud that came in from the west, like thunderstorms usually do in Wisconsin, and then went over the city and everything just got dark. So what I'm thinking is this was a little isolated supercell thunderstorm that was somehow unique in its position that made it somehow darker than a typical thunderstorm. For example, on April 30th, 1971, there was a recorded dark day over Jacksonville, Florida, but this was easily explained. As darkness fell over Jacksonville, Florida on that day, the National Weather Service issued a tornado warning because there was a spontaneous supercell that popped up. Even when you talk about the Bridge Creek Moore tornado from May 3rd, 1999, if you look at the live coverage of that, it's pretty dark. It's pretty dark over the city. This occurred during the day when the sun was still pretty high up in the sky. And with that being said, I think that thunderstorms after solar eclipses could be another explanation for the majority of dark day events in recorded history. Here's the thing though. Solar eclipses and thunderstorms cannot explain every dark day event. Let's go back again to New England's dark day of 1780. The people who lived in New England, they had witnessed thunderstorms throughout their lives. They knew what a thunderstorm was like. They knew how dark it got during a thunderstorm. And this event was clearly different. People were freaking out. People were praying. Also, it lasted way too long to have been a thunderstorm. So there must have been something else going on. So to figure out the cause of this dark day, we must look at more eyewitness accounts to look for more clues. Some eyewitness accounts described rain that occurred during the event, and in this rain was kind of a dirty soot, almost like ash. Others described a smoke-like smell during the event. One account stated this: during the darkness of the day, a disagreeable smell was perceived, some resembling it to the smell proceeding from a chimney on fire, others to that which arises from swamps on fire. A like smell was perceived in the evening, united with that of sea salts. Sounds to me like a fire might play a role in all the darkness. One thing we should ask ourselves is, has there been any recent events that are similar to this event that occurred over New England in 1780? And the answer to that is yes. Many back in 1780 described a yellowish hue to the sky before the event. And perhaps you may recall that time in recent history when New York City became super yellow. On June 7th, 2023, New York City and much of New England experienced a yellow hue throughout the entire sky. And we know exactly what caused this event. There were Canadian wildfires during this time, and the wind had blown that smoke high up into the atmosphere over New York City, and then sunlight went through and scattered in a way to create a yellow hue. There was also the 2020 San Francisco Orange Skies Day. This was also caused by wildfires. Now, I know that this is not healthy. Like, you do not want this for your city. The breathing conditions are not good. But this is definitely a vibe. I mean, that's like some Blade Runner stuff. Kind of cool. Not healthy, not good, but kind of cool. So, during the dark day of June 19th, 1780, it's pretty clear that there was a wildfire atmospheric phenomenon going on. People were claiming there was a smoky smell in the atmosphere. People were talking about like dirty rain. There were the yellow skies. It's clearly a wildfire. But here's the thing, all right? New York City did not experience a dark day in 2023. Neither did San Francisco in 2020. So what happened in 1780 that made it so dark? So scientists actually believe that there were a few factors at play. You take New England's yellow sky event from only a few years back and then combine it with thick fog or perhaps even a thunderstorm, you can get a pretty substantial dark day. Throughout centuries, people did still argue what really was the factor behind New England's dark day. Most experts thought it was a forest fire or a series of forest fires that caused this event, but we wouldn't have proof until 2008. Here's the thing. Tree rings. Tree rings are dope because you can look at tree rings and figure out what happened during that specific year. If a tree has a lot of growth, there might have been a lot of rain, a lot of favorable conditions that year. If there was like no growth, then there must have been something bad happening. And people at the University of Missouri were able to decipher that in 1780, something was not good for the trees. When they were investigating tree rings from a forest in Ontario, Canada, researchers noticed that there were strange fire scars that appeared in the year 1780. These fire scars were essentially the smoking gun evidence to prove that the dark day of 1780 was indeed caused by forest fires. At the end of the day, a dark day is essentially just a lack of transparency of the sun in the sky. So, when you have a cloudy day, well, it's a little bit darker because there's some stuff blocking the sun. But if you get more and more stuff in the atmosphere, the darker the sun gets. And eventually it becomes so dark that it's dark as night. It's just super rare for that occasion to occur. You have to have several factors. Wildfire smoke high up in the atmosphere with a fog rolling in at the same time. Perhaps a dust storm that gets lofted high up into the atmosphere, also creating a darkness below. So you might think that this has all been solved. We know what causes every dark day in recorded history. Well, there are still a few dark days that remain quite mysterious. One example came on June 2nd, 1802, when a sailor over the Pacific Ocean described dark clouds rolling in. These clouds became thicker and thicker till they were essentially black, and they blocked out the sun, creating a dark day. This sailor stated that the water was completely calm. There was no wind, there were no storms, everything seemed normal, except for the darkness. One very peculiar dark day occurred over Pernambuco, Brazil on April 11th, 1860. According to Strange Events researcher Charles Fort, around noon on a cloudless day, the sun essentially went black. The environment was so dark that the planet Venus could easily be seen. The darkness lasted for several minutes. You're probably thinking, solar eclipse, clearly it's a solar eclipse. Well, no. The two total solar eclipses for 1860 occurred on January 23rd and July 18th, not April 11th. Could something else out in space somehow block the sun's light from reaching Earth? I mean, that's the only possible explanation. A comet or something? Probably not, but still a weird event for sure. Another very famous dark day occurred over the Yamal Peninsula on September 18th, 1938. Witnesses again described a yellow hue that slowly turned from brown to red to black. What's interesting about this event is that this darkness messed with the radio signals, so local meteorologists, local residents couldn't contact any authorities. Unlike New England's dark day in 1780, this event had no rain, it had no smell, it had no dust. It just got dark for a couple hours and then dissipated. So clearly the dark day phenomenon is a real thing. And you might be thinking, if it's a real thing, where are the recent examples? How come every example you're giving happened a long time ago, sometimes over 100 years? Well, you'd be in luck, because a dark day actually occurred in 2018. On July 20th, 2018, a darkness surrounded several communities in Russia's Sakha region. Again, we're in Siberia. Weird things happen in Siberia. These are real pictures from the event. Now, during the summertime, it's pretty much always daylight this far north. So when it got super dark around noon, the residents in these communities started to freak out. According to one resident, around 11 a.m. on the 20th, the sky started to darken. It was as if a storm was approaching, but there was a yellowish tint. Then from 12 p.m. to 1 p.m., it went dark. Then, the sky began to brighten sharply. Further to the east, another resident claimed this. After lunch around 2 p.m., it began to slowly darken. There was a slight stuffiness. No wind, no sun, no light. As if life had stopped. Some residents were even joking that the apocalypse had come. We even have video of this event. Check it out. Thankfully, this occurred in 2018 in an area where we have satellite technology, so we can actually scope out the area to see what happened. Right here, you're looking at satellite imagery from that day, and this right here, this red dot, is the location of where a lot of these sightings occurred. What do you see? Well, there's definitely smoke. Definitely wildfire smoke, but you also see a lot of clouds high in the sky. So likely what happened is multiple factors were at play. You probably had some of these clouds mixed in with the wildfire smoke, creating just a uniquely dense atmosphere, therefore creating the dark day. Dark days are definitely one of the eerier natural phenomenons, and in some ways they're still quite perplexing. The idea of a sudden darkness plaguing a city sounds like it's out of a fiction novel, and that's why dark days are so intriguing to so many. But hopefully you have no dark days in your future. Hopefully your future is bright and sunny. And with that said, thank you so much for watching, and we'll see you next time.